You are insignificant, not as an insult, as a cosmic fact. There exist forces in this universe so vast, so utterly alien, so indifferent to your existence, that merely glimpsing them would shatter the human mind. This is the dark philosophy of Cosmicism, the haunting worldview of Howard Phillips Lovecraft, the man who taught the modern world to fear the stars. In an age before science fiction had a name, before space horror was a genre, a sickly, anxious recluse from Providence, Rhode Island looked up at the night sky and saw something most of us refuse to see. He saw the void, and he saw, staring back at him, God so monstrous, so unknowable, that humanity itself was nothing more than ants crawling across the foot of a dreaming giant. This is not a story about monsters. It is a story about the most terrifying idea any philosopher has ever proposed. The idea that the universe does not care whether you live or die, that your civilization, your laws, your love, your God mean nothing, that out there in the black seas of infinity, things are watching, and one day when the stars are right, they will wake up. To understand Cosmicism, you must first understand the broken, brilliant, deeply strange man who built it. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born in 1890 in Providence, Rhode Island, a city he would come to love so fiercely that near the end of his life he simply wrote, "I am Providence." But long before he became one of the most influential horror writers in history, he was a frail, sickly boy haunted by phantoms only he could see. When Howard was 3 years old, his father, Winfield Scott Lovecraft, suffered a violent psychotic episode in a Chicago hotel room. He was committed to an asylum where he would die 5 years later, almost certainly from advanced syphilis. Howard would be told only that his father had suffered paralysis. His mother, Sarah Susan Phillips Lovecraft, was both his protector and, in some quiet way, his tormentor. She became obsessively overprotective. She also told the boy that he was hideous, that he should hide his face from the world. Howard internalized this. As an adult, witnesses recall him pulling a raincoat up over his head on the street, terrified of being looked at. His refuge was his grandfather. Whipple Van Buren Phillips became the central figure of young Howard's universe. He filled the family's vast Victorian home with classical literature, dark poetry, and strange tales. He even, by introducing the boy to the literature of the macabre, cured Howard of his fear of the dark. The boy was precocious, reciting poetry at age 2, reading at 3, writing at 6. Then the world began to collapse. His grandmother died, and the family fell into a mourning so heavy that little Howard began to have terrible nightmares, dreams of black, faceless, leathery creatures who would snatch him up and carry him through infinite leagues of cold black air, over the towers of dead and horrible cities, before letting him drop into voids of needle-like mountains. He would wake up screaming. He called them night gaunts. They would haunt him forever. Eventually, they would haunt his fiction. When his grandfather died, the family lost everything. They were forced to leave the Victorian home. Howard later described this as one of the darkest periods of his life. He contemplated suicide. What stopped him in the end was a strange and almost noble curiosity. He wanted to know more about the universe. He wanted to keep reading. At 8 years old, he discovered astronomy, and astronomy, more than anything else, would forge his philosophy. Through his telescope, the boy did not see comfort or wonder. He saw infinity. He saw, in his own words, the miserable denizens of a wretched little fly speck on the back door of a microscopic universe. He would have a nervous collapse in high school. He dropped out. He remained self-educated for the rest of his life. He would never quite belong to the world. In 1921, his mother died, admitted in a grim cemetery, to the very same asylum where his father had died decades before. Howard once again sank into despair. But then he met Sonia Green, married her, and briefly tried to build a normal life in New York City. It did not work. He felt alienated in the crowded foreign metropolis. He hated it. And his prejudices, and he had many. Lovecraft was undeniably a racist man, even by some of the standards of his time, calcified in this period. We cannot ignore this. He was a product of his era, but his bigotry was extreme even within it. It bleeds into his fiction in ways that demand honest reckoning, not silence. He returned to Providence in 1926 and lived in poverty for the rest of his life. Most of his greatest works appeared in cheap pulp magazines that almost no one read. In 1937, at the age of 46, intestinal cancer killed him. He died believing his work would vanish into nothing. He could not have been more wrong. So what exactly did Lovecraft believe? Cosmicism is a philosophy. It is not, despite appearances, primarily about monsters. The tentacles, the cyclopean cities, the unpronounceable names. These are symptoms, not the disease. At its core, Cosmicism proposes that humanity is cosmically insignificant, not metaphorically, literally. We are accidents of chemistry on a small rocky planet orbiting an average star, in a galaxy of 200 billion stars, in a universe of perhaps 2 trillion galaxies. Our entire recorded history occupies an unimaginably small sliver of cosmic time. From the perspective of the universe itself, we are not the protagonists of any story. We are not even extras. We are, at best, a brief and irrelevant flicker. Most philosophies, most religions, exist precisely to shield us from this idea. They place humans at the center. They say, God made you in His image. The universe has a plan for you. You matter. You will be remembered. Lovecraft tore that comfort away. He looked at the actual scale of the cosmos as revealed by modern science and asked the question almost no one wanted to ask. What if none of our meaning is real? What if morality, love, beauty, justice, and evil are not features of the universe, but local hallucinations of one strange ape on one strange planet, signifying nothing? He wrote, to achieve the essence of real externality, whether of time or space or dimension, one must forget that such things as organic life, good and evil, love and hate, and all such local attributes of a negligible and temporary race called mankind, have any existence at all. This is the dagger Lovecraft holds to your throat. He is not asking you to fear vampires. He is asking you to confront the possibility that everything you have ever cared about is a beautiful, fragile lie. Lovecraft once wrote, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown." It is perhaps the most quoted opening line in horror literature, and it is the keystone of everything that follows. Other horror traditions had explored fear before him. The Gothic novel feared the past, crumbling castles, vengeful ghosts, ancestral sins. The vampire feared corrupted desire. The werewolf feared the beast inside the man. These are all fears of things we know, things that can be named, things that ultimately want something from us. Lovecraft did something new. He shifted the source of horror outward, beyond morality, beyond civilization, beyond the planet itself. The thing in his stories that destroys you is not a ghost with unfinished business. It is a creature for which creature is not even a meaningful word, a geometry that should not exist, a color that should not be possible, a God that does not hate you because hating you would require it to notice you in the first place. This is the central terrible insight of Cosmicism. Indifference is more horrifying than malice. A demon wants your soul. A vampire wants your blood. These things acknowledge your importance, even in destroying you. Cthulhu does not want anything from you. If he wakes, he will crush you the way you crush an insect on a windshield. Not in cruelty, but in passing. Not because you are an enemy, but because you are simply not relevant. In Lovecraft's most famous opening, he writes, "The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far." Read that again, slowly. He is saying that our ignorance is not a flaw. It is a mercy. It is the only thing keeping us sane. He continues, "The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little. But some day the piecing together of dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age." Lovecraft is making a radical claim. It's one that sounds almost anti-enlightenment. He is saying that science, the great project of revealing the universe, is also the project of destroying us. Every truth we uncover is a step closer to a final, unbearable truth. In his story, The Color Out of Space, a meteorite crashes on a remote farm. From it emerges a color. And Lovecraft uses the word color because there is no other word in human language for what the witnesses see. It is a hue from beyond the visible spectrum. It poisons the soil, the water, the animals, and the people. Scientists examine it. They cannot classify it. It eludes every instrument, every category. It simply is. And by simply being, it destroys. This is Lovecraft's terror, not that the universe is full of things that want to kill us, but that it is full of things that our minds were never designed to perceive. To see them, truly see them, is to break. Around this central philosophy, Lovecraft built what we now call the Cthulhu mythos, though he himself never used that term. It is not a complete mythology. It is deliberately incomplete. It is full of contradictions, gaps, and half-glimpsed truths. That is the point. A complete pantheon is comforting, an incomplete one is unsettling. The word Cthulhu, by the way, is supposed to be non-human. There is no correct way for a human mouth to say it. Lovecraft himself suggested the closest approximation was something like Cthulhu, a sound that should not be pronounced by lips, teeth, or tongue. At the bottom of the hierarchy are the elder things, the first species to colonize Earth 1 billion years ago. They built vast alien cities now frozen and forgotten beneath the Antarctic ice. They created the Shoggoths, protoplasmic slaves capable of taking any form who eventually rebelled. In At the Mountains of Madness, a group of explorers in Antarctica meets a Shoggoth. Lovecraft describes it like this: "It was a terrible, indescribable thing, vaster than any subway train, a shapeless congeries of protoplasmic bubbles, faintly self-luminous, and with myriads of temporary eyes forming and unforming as pustules of greenish light all over the tunnel-filling front that bore down upon us. A monster the size of a train with no fixed shape, growing and unmaking eyes as it moves." This is Lovecraft's signature trick. He almost never tells you exactly what something looks like, because what he wants you to feel is the failure of language itself. Above the elder things are the great old ones, demigods, ancient beings who once ruled the earth and now sleep, waiting. The most famous is Cthulhu himself. He lies dreaming in the sunken city of R'lyeh beneath the Pacific Ocean. His followers chant in his house at R'lyeh, "Dead Cthulhu waits dreaming, and that is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die." Cthulhu is not evil. Cthulhu is not even, in the strict sense, alive. He is something that human concepts simply do not fit. He is described as anthropoid in outline, with an octopus-like head, vast wings and scaly green flesh. But Lovecraft is careful to remind us that this description is itself a lie. The thing cannot be described, he writes. There is no language for such abysms of shrieking and immemorial lunacy, such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order. A mountain walked or stumbled. The name Cthulhu echoes the word chthonic, that which belongs to the underworld. He is sleeping yet eternal, waking yet dreaming, dead yet alive. From the floor of the Pacific he speaks to dreamers across the world. A global secret cult prays for his return. They do not understand, they cannot understand, that they are praying for their own annihilation. Beneath the waves there are also the deep ones, amphibious humanoids who worship the entity Dagon, who breed with humans in the rotting coastal town of Innsmouth, producing hybrid descendants who slowly, year by year, transform into them. Some of them, Lovecraft suggests with unbearable casualness, may be reading his stories. Some of them may be you, but above all of these are the outer gods. These are not Earth's gods, these are cosmic entities dwelling beyond the ultimate gate, in voids outside thought and existence. There are four you must know. Yog-Sothoth is the gatekeeper of all space and time. He is described as a mass of iridescent spheres coexisting in every dimension simultaneously. Yog-Sothoth knows the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the key and guardian of the gate. Past, present, future, all are one in Yog-Sothoth. Those who seek forbidden knowledge worship him. They almost always go mad. Shub-Niggurath is the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young, a vast, fertile, hellish, cloud-like horror. She is barely described because Lovecraft refuses to describe her. She is sometimes called the not-to-be-named one. Whatever she is the engine of monstrous fertility in the mythos. Nyarlathotep is different. Unlike most of the outer gods, he is active. He walks the earth in 1,000 forms, sometimes as a tall, dark man in foreign robes, sometimes as something stranger. He is called the crawling chaos, the trickster, the messenger of the outer gods. He delights in deceiving humans, in granting them visions that destroy them. If any of Lovecraft's gods can be said to have a personality, it is Nyarlathotep, and that personality is cruel. And then at the center of it all, there is Azathoth, the blind idiot god, the demon sultan, the nuclear chaos at the center of all infinity. Azathoth is the most powerful being in the entire mythos, and he is utterly unconscious. He sits at the center of the universe, mindless, and around him lesser gods dance and play maddening tunes on flutes and drums to keep him asleep. Because if Azathoth wakes, if he so much as stirs, reality itself will end, because reality is his dream. The universe exists because Azathoth dreams it. We exist because we are passing thoughts in the dream of a sleeping idiot god. Sit with that for a moment. You exist because something that has no mind is asleep. To express the inexpressible, Lovecraft reached for a strange tool, mathematics. He wrote of geometries that should not be there, of an angle which was acute but behaved as if it were obtuse, of architecture that was non-Euclidean, a phrase he uses almost like an incantation. The dream city of Helaer, when it rises from the ocean, is described as having impossible angles, walls that meet at corners that should not exist, stairways that seem to descend and ascend at the same time. What Lovecraft intuited, long before most fiction caught up, was that a creature from a higher dimension, perceived in our lower dimensional space, would look wrong, not just ugly, wrong in a way our minds cannot process. Imagine us two-dimensional being, an ant, on a sheet of paper. Now imagine a human hand reaching through the paper. From the ant's perspective, 5 disconnected fleshy circles appear out of nothing, pulse with strange warm liquid, then vanish. The ant cannot perceive the hand. It can only perceive the cross-section of the hand passing through its plane. Now imagine you are the ant. Imagine Cthulhu is the hand. This is why Lovecraft's creatures cannot be described. It is not that he lacked imagination. It is that the impossibility of description is itself the horror. His characters are perceiving cross-sections of things vastly larger than them, and those cross-sections alone are enough to drive them insane. In The Dreams in the Witch House, he writes of objects that defy comprehension entirely. Groups of bubbles, octopi, centipedes, living Hindu idols, and intricate arabesques roused into a kind of ophidian animation. Things that appear suddenly out of empty space and disappear with equal suddenness. We cannot perceive them unless they choose to enter our three-dimensional world. They watch us. We do not watch them. We are entirely at their mercy. Throughout Lovecraft's work, one theme returns again and again. Knowledge kills. His characters are often scholars, antiquarians, scientists, linguists. They seek the truth, and the truth destroys them. The most infamous artifact in his fiction is the Necronomicon, the forbidden grimoire written by the so-called mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred. To read it is to begin to see is to begin to break. Many of his protagonists die or descend into madness simply because they refused to stop reading. Why do they keep reading? Because Lovecraft understood something profound about us. We cannot bear the silence of the void. If we do not know what is out there, we will invent answers. And if those answers begin to seem true, we will pursue them, even when every instinct screams at us to stop. The hunger to know is stronger than the will to live. Once knowledge enters you, it cannot be unlearned. A diagnosis of disease, once spoken, becomes part of you forever. There is no going back to the moment before you knew. Lovecraft's protagonists learn this the hard way. Their final lines, scrawled in trembling handwriting at the end of so many of his stories, are confessions of a knowledge they wish they had never gained. Lovecraft also believed deeply in dreams. Many of his stories began as nightmares. The dreamlands in his fiction are a real and shared dimension, accessible through deep sleep, populated by gods and monsters, mirroring the unconscious mind itself. In The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, the protagonist Randolph Carter journeys through these lands in search of a marvelous sunset city, and finds something far stranger waiting for him. In the related story, Through the Gates of the Silver Key, Carter unlocks the ultimate gate. There he sees all of his past selves and all of his future selves at once. He sees Carters in every age of the Earth's history. He sees that each tiny decision spawned another Carter, another life, another timeline, and he realizes, with calm, devastating clarity, that he is not a single, definite being. The boundary of the self begins to dissolve. This is the moment of true cosmicism. The horror is not external. The horror is the loss of the idea that you are you. The French philosopher Gilles Deleuze described this transformation as a movement from paranoia to schizo-madness. Paranoia is the urge to force everything into alignment with your own identity, to defend the self at all costs. Schizo-madness, in Deleuze's sense, is the opposite, the acceptance that the self is plural, fragmented, woven into countless others. Carl Jung called something similar individuation, the slow, painful integration of the unconscious into the self. Lovecraft, in his own dark way, was reaching towards the same idea. To survive the cosmos is to stop pretending you are the center of it. Perhaps Lovecraft's most personal story is The Outsider. In it, a lonely man lives in an immense, decaying castle, with no memory of having ever seen another living human being. He cannot recall sunlight. He cannot recall a face. One day, desperate, he climbs the highest tower of the castle, convinced that it is better to glimpse the sky and perish than to live in eternal darkness. He emerges into a strange, lit world. He stumbles upon a gathering of people, and they recoil in horror, fleeing with screams of terror at the sight of him. He cannot understand what has frightened them so completely. He looks around for the source of their horror. And then, in a doorway, he sees it. The monstrous thing they were running from. He approaches it. He reaches out a hand to touch it, and his fingers meet cold, polished glass. The monster was his own reflection. "I know always," he writes, "that I am an outsider, a stranger in this century, and among those who are still men." This, perhaps more than anything else, is the Lovecraft beneath the tentacles, a man who never felt human, who looked in the mirror and could not recognize himself, who built an entire cosmology, gods, dimensions, sleeping monsters, around the suspicion that he, and possibly all of us, do not really belong here. The window of otherness, Lovecraft seems to whisper at the end, opens both ways. We do not just fear what is outside us, we fear what is already inside. So what do we take from all this? Lovecraft was, in many ways, a deeply broken man. He was anxious, he was xenophobic, he was reclusive, he was poor, he died believing he had failed. And yet, nearly a century later, his ideas have escaped the page and infected the entire modern imagination. Every story about cosmic horror, every film about unknowable aliens, every video game about gods sleeping beneath the sea, all of it carries his fingerprint. He created a genre, a vocabulary, an entire way of looking at the dark. But the deepest reason Cosmicism endures is not because it is entertaining. It is because, on some level, it might be true. We do live on a small planet around an average star, in a universe so vast we cannot meaningfully comprehend it. We are, in cosmic terms, a brief and improbable event. The universe is not built for us. It does not know we are here. The stars do not love us. The void does not weep for us. When the last human dies, the cosmos will not pause. The question Lovecraft leaves us with is not, are there monsters in the void? The question is, how do you live knowing that the void is real? Some flee back into ignorance. Some lose themselves in the deadly light and break. Some, and this perhaps is the unspoken hope buried in Lovecraft's bleakness, build something beautiful in the brief candle of our existence, knowing full well that the dark will swallow it. Knowing that meaning is not found, it is made. The stars are indifferent, the gods are sleeping, the void is patient, and we are still here for now, looking up.